I'm sure it comes no surprise to you when you hear the word pathological liar. It isn't a word that many of us as human beings can escape, because at some point in our lives, we're going to encounter or be around or have a relationship with or have to do business with or share a life with somebody who is a pathological liar. We all hear the term compulsive liar, pathological liar, deception and not being very honest. We hear those things, right? And in our society, we tend to throw it around like it's the next new big thing. But the reality is this: the pathological lying, it follows a specific track that a lot of professionals over time have been able to discern, study, and make sense out of. And it isn't just the human behavior of being deceptive. There's a lot that goes into being a pathological liar. There is a lot of brain energy that is at the foundation of lying. Lying sometimes creates what we call cognitive load. And cognitive load is really like the brain's way of trying to adapt to the lie. And in the process of trying to adapt to the lie, the person is experiencing so much distress and maybe even cognitive confusion that it's hard for them to stay the course of a lie. Take, for example, your mom. Let's say she's a narcissist and she's very self-centered and wants to be in control at all times. You have a son and he is 12 months old. You want to know what your mom is going to do when she takes your son to the mall. Are you going to buy him clothes? Are you going to try to get his hair cut? What are you going to do? Your narcissistic mother may, tell you one thing, take your son to the mall, get his hair cut, get his ears pierced, and buy him clothing that is very different from the clothing that you want for him. You call your mom and you say, how did things go at the mall? Was he a good boy for you? And your mother may say, well, he was a good boy. We didn't have any tantrums. He seemed to be very invested in the trip to the mall because nobody really understands that he is a good boy, because every time I take him somewhere, we never have a problem. He's polite, he's engaging, he's just the most fantastic baby. Everybody compliments us. Everybody wants to touch him and hold him and be friends with him and see how he communicates with them. He's just the cutest child. And you know what? On top of that, we had a fantastic trip to the park as well after the mall. And I should have told you we went to the park, but I figured you wouldn't mind. And the list goes on. So the mother is being tangential. Here's the definition on the screen. The lie is causing her to go on and on and on and on. And a person who does this doesn't always have to be a pathological liar, but they're trying to cover the truth of things. And so we have long drawn out sentences. It's like I'm trying to tell this lie and I'm trying really hard to get the lie to sound believable. So I've got to add all of this detail. And I've got to keep track of the last thing I said, which creates a cognitive load, right? The other way that a cognitive load can happen is, you have your mom kind of go over what happened in reverse order. So you may say something like, Mom, you guys said you went to the park, right? So after you went to the park, where did you go? And she may say, well, we went over and got some ice cream. You may say, oh, okay, but wasn't there ice cream at the mall? And then she may say, what mall? Oh, you mean the mall that we went to? Well, I don't think there was, because we were only on the top floor. You may say, there's ice cream at the bottom of the mall. Why didn't you guys just go downstairs and get ice cream? And your mom may say, oh, there's ice cream on the bottom part of the mall. Oh, I didn't know that. Next time I'll go in there and I'll head straight to the downstairs area of the mall so we can see what that's all about. But after we came from the mall, we went to the park and then we went home. And you may say, oh, I thought you said you went to get ice cream after the mall. And she may say, oh, yeah, that's right. I almost forgot that detail. It's hard for liars to go back and trace what they just said while keeping up with what they need to say next to make the lie sound believable. Does that make sense? German psychiatrist Dr. Delbruck, in 1891, he described this as pseudologia fantastica. And pathological lying is the English version of this. It really represents a personality trait, not an episode. So a lot of us think pathological liars are just behaving this way in this moment, that this is an episode that they are going through. And the reality is, it's not an episode. It's a personality trait. And it's a pervasive, chronic pattern of behavior that affects most of the time not only the liar, but everybody else around the liar. In some research studies, primarily in Healy's study, here they are on the screen, they say that pathological lying is a falsification that is entirely disproportionate to any discernible end in view, right? There may not be an end in view, right? But they're going to tell the lie anyway, and they're going to keep adding on bits and pieces of the lie, right? And this manifests itself, this compulsive pattern of excessive lying manifests itself, over years and over a lifetime. There is not going to be any kind of end in sight, no matter how irrational, I'll put it that way, the lie is. Now, other people, these authors here on the screen, they say that a pervasive, persistent, often compulsive pattern of excessive lying is a behavior that leads to clinically significant distress. What is clinically significant distress? Well, social and occupational distress. I've lied so much that my friends are leaving me, my family's leaving me, my job is leaving me, nobody believes in me, even the people that I share a support group with, and even my therapist and the police don't believe what I'm saying, right? So there's social and occupational distress. There's also tons and tons of emotional and psychological distress, because the liar has to lie to cover the last lie. They have to lie in circles and in loops, right? They have to lie in a way that is believable, and that takes a lot of energy and emotion. It's this difficulty that often hits them in building strong connections because nobody trusts them. It leaves a lot of distress. There's also risk to self and others, right? When I lie, I'm going to hurt me, and I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to hurt him, and I'm going to hurt her, right? And then it occurs. This lying pattern occurs longer than 6 months. Lying can be a downward spiral, for lack of a clinical term. It's a curated personal narrative. And these curated personal narratives are so perplexing sometimes that it may be hard for you to figure out where they are, hard for me to figure out where they are, and I'm a therapist. Hard for the police to even figure out where they are. These individuals engage in continual lying. There is neuroscience that can help us understand this as well. Some studies on the brain shows that there's some changes going on. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. There's some changes going on neurologically. And what happens is lying no longer triggers guilt and blame or shame. Right? It never triggers that, what if I'm blamed for A, B, and C because I lie all the time? It never triggers guilt. How could I do something like that to my family? Right? And it also never really triggers an internalized emotional response of distress and anxiety and worry and maybe even some neuroticism because of how they have really been very condescending to everybody else by playing with their mind, telling continual lies, and expecting them never to find out. It's almost like this indirect insult when somebody is lying to your face. And the brain responds to that. The brain says, oh, so we've lied here, we've lied there, we've lied over there, we've lied up into the sky, we've lied down, under the ground. We've done all kind of stuff in our human existence that involves lies. So you know what? The next time you tell a lie, it's not going to bother me. And the brain is no longer affected by these personal, curated stories and narratives that don't exist. And so when that happens, it makes it easier for the brain to continue to lie. If you feel like you know somebody like this and you're trying to understand what is going on with them, then you definitely want to keep on watching. All right, guys, let's talk about this. Okay, so what's going on in the brain? Let's start with the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is basically this, and I'm going to draw it out for you just so that you can see what this looks like. You guys who are my longtime supporters, you know how much I love diagrams, because I think it really gives us what we need to kind of think and see with our own eyes, you know? So I'm going to draw a really bad picture of the brain. So we're going to do, ooh, that was a bad picture of the brain. I'm just going to be honest. So the prefrontal cortex is in the frontal lobes, okay? And that's the front of the brain. And the prefrontal cortex really controls our decision making, right? Ability to be less impulsive, right? So it controls impulsivity. Okay. There's also some personality development here. Ooh, if I can get this to work. Okay. And when a person lies, they are calling on the prefrontal cortex. Because when a person tells a fib, a lie, or they engage in deception, what happens in the prefrontal cortex? Well, we get an increased amount of activity. And so I'm going to kind of like, you know, draw this in squiggly lines, okay? Because we get a lot of brain stimulation in the frontal lobes. So the frontal lobes in a fMRI, which is a functional magnetic resonance imaging, it's that MRI machine that people go in, but functional MRIs are those which can show you a closer picture of these brain regions. So in the prefrontal cortex, or the frontal lobes, we have an area that is really overstimulated when a person is lying, because they have to be able to put together facts, to inhibit impulsivity, to be deceptive, right? And so there's decisions that have to be made there as well. So we have activity in the prefrontal cortex, and this is what this looks like up close, okay? See that? And we have a little bit of activity there. Now, if we go to another part of the brain, which is called the temporal lobes, okay? So I'm going to draw this in here. So this is the temporal lobes, okay? And in the temporal lobes, we have theory of mind, which is empathy, right? We have the ability to recall memories that are, I'm going to say, of pictures, right? Or imagery. We're just going to say that. Okay? Imagery. Okay, I think that's the right way you spell it. So there's activity in the temporal cortex, or the temporal lobes, which is on the side of the brain. Okay, so there we go. This is how it looks in the brain. See that? The temporal lobes, and that has a lot to do again with. Here it is on the screen. I'm going to put it up here for you. It has a lot to do with really retrieving memories and producing mental images. And sadly, the temporal lobes is basically what is reached for in the moment of fabricating stories, because the temporal lobe says, you know, here's the imagery, here's the picture, here's the narrative. And the person can reach for that, right, with their brain and use it against you. And the temporal lobe says, hey, here's what happened here and there, and put these two pieces together, and you got a fabricated story. There's another part of the brain, and it's kind of like in the middle of the brain, and I don't know how to draw an almond, so bear with me. It's an almond-sized structure in the middle of your brain, and we talk about this all the time. The almond-sized structure is the amygdala, okay? And the amygdala is a small structure, and I'm just going to color in some other parts of the brain so you can see what this looks like. Okay, and the amygdala has a lot to do with episodic memory, right? So memory, emotional memories, okay, and fear response, okay, which is often minimal with pathological liars. Fear response is minimal. That's why they don't get afraid when they tell a lie. Because there's a lot of activity in the emotional centers of the brain. And the more the body and the brain gets used to all of those brain chemicals and hormonal chemicals and activity in the brain just kind of says, oh, you're telling another lie. I know how this goes. So, you know, I'm an expert at this. So here's where the amygdala is. See that, guys? Almond-sized structure in the middle of the brain. There you go, okay? Limbic system. So this is another part of the brain. The limbic system is around the amygdala, okay? And I'm just going to put that here. Limbic system. The amygdala is attached to the limbic system, okay? And let me highlight this really briefly for you. The limbic system is always somewhere close near the amygdala. They are pretty much adjacent organs, okay? And they influence each other. And when there's memories of one thing, the limbic system gives you memories and supports those memories, and everything is integrated. And before you know it, there's a whole lie. You know what I mean? So there's definitely a neurological basis for lying. There's more intricate studies, but I'm not going to mention them here. I just want to throw out there that lying is based on neurological pieces of the puzzle. It's based on a personality trait and not 1 or 2 or 3 episodes, right? It's based on a personality trait. And the person may experience distress, and there may be a ton of problems that's going on in their life. So what do these people look like? Let's talk about this, okay, guys? Let's start with changes in vocal tone. These people really do have a strange way that they kind of communicate to people around them and people in the world. They have a strange sounding vocal tone. Sometimes it goes from really high to very low, and sometimes they're in a whisper, and that's how you know that they're lying. The emotions that they are feeling or experiencing on the inside is changing their vocal tone. So somebody who speaks really high pitched like this may become really low like this when they're lying, because they don't want you to be able to find the truth. Right? It's like this sultry kind of sound sometimes, you know. They also tend to communicate with us in third person, you know, using the third person, what am I trying to say here? The third person narrative, or the third person reference when they are talking about themselves. And that's an interesting piece of the puzzle. It's like they're trying to get furthest away from that lie, right? That they can. The other thing is, these sneaky individuals, they either give way too much detail or not enough detail, right? And they may be vague. That's just kind of who they are. It begins in adolescence for a lot of pathological liars. And you may notice some embellishments, you know, catastrophizing, being overly dramatic. That when you engage in pseudologia fantastica, you're engaging in a behavior that almost sets you up to be found out. Because whether you say anything or not, your vocal tone is going to give you away. Your body language is going to give you away, right? The embellishments and catastrophizing of the situation is going to give you away, right? Cognitive load is going to give you away, because you can't hold on to all those pieces of the puzzle because it's just too many details. So you can't tell a lie in reverse order because it puts way too much pressure on the brain, and the brain cannot handle that, right? The other thing you're likely to see is poor cognitive control. They tend to be very, very impulsive, and they may spew a lie in a minute or spit out something that they weren't supposed to be talking about or saying. You may also notice something like the slippery slope with these people. They start with one white lie. They start with, you know, the most innocent sounding lie that can be believed. Then for step number 2, they tell the next lie, and they may have justifications for it. Number 3, they have a new lie, but now this lie is totally unacceptable, but they're going to do it because they feel that they can get away with it. And it just gets progressively worse. For survival and as a social strategy, you know, if you think about it, a man that is in a group of women, and other men, if he has his eye on one person, he may find that that one person is somebody that he needs to fight the entire room over to get to. So what does he do? Well, he lies to that one, lies to that one, lies to that one. Then he concocts some kind of story that is based on a lie. Their motivation to avoid punishment may also encourage pathological lying. I'm going to lie to the police. I'm going to lie to my parents. I'm going to lie to my husband, my wife, right? So lying is motivated by sometimes fear, but also by wanting to cover things up, right? There's also this desire to enhance a social image, right? Liars are liars. And if I have to lie to tell you that I have a BMW, if I have to lie to tell you I have a $5 million home, if I have to lie to make you hire me, if I have to lie to make you date me or marry me, then that is what I'm going to do. They want to look a certain way, and it is despicable. There's a scripture that I love, and I grew up on this scripture. It's Luke 16:10, I believe it is. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. And the scripture is, whoever is dishonest in little is dishonest in much. So you can't really believe them, right? Because if you've told a white lie, and if you've told several white lies, you're probably going to lie about something else. And research in psychology backs that up. The brain science backs it up as well. Neuroscience suggests that your brain kind of becomes conditioned over time to telling lies, which makes it easier to tell the next lie and the next lie. So it is something that can happen, and it can continue for many, many years. Context is significant with liars. If you're at home and you're comfortable at home and there's nobody else there to contest what is being said, or ask questions that are necessary to get to the truth, that person may continue to lie some more, right? If they are in a court of law and they have, said that they will tell the truth under oath, lying behavior may cease in that particular context. So context is really important at times as well. Also keep in mind that cues that someone is lying is not the same in everyone. We always look for eye contact, lack of eye contact. We always look for dilated pupils or heavy breathing or sweating or some signs of anxiety or panic. And that is not always the case with people who are pathological liars. Remember, the brain can become so adapted to lying and so conditioned that no matter what, that person is not going to sweat under pressure. No matter what, that person is not going to shake and cry and scream. Sometimes they are cool as a cucumber, and they're going to stay that way. This is an intricate topic, and the more intricate it gets, the faster we go down a slippery slope. If you look at the research, you find that, oh my God, this piece is important, this piece is important, what about that piece over there? So come join me Friday and Saturday live. I'm going to be talking more about this then. I hope to see you then. Bye-bye.